Welcome to Occult Archives. You know, that little corner of your mind where we like to um, peer back the layers, kind of like an onion, on those books that are kind of shrouded in mystery.
Mm.
You know, those books people talk about in hushed tones, the ones that supposedly have that dangerous knowledge,
Right,
the stuff
right.
that's just too much, too transformative to just, casually read.
Hmm.
So from those like spellbinding pages of grimoires to, I guess you could say the ancient texts, we're here to, explore those mysteries.
Yes,
And
yes.
today we are going deep, and I
Mm.
mean deep, into the healing flame, occult principles of health and spiritual medicine by Max Heindel.
That's a fascinating book, really.
Yeah, it is. This Max Heindel, quite a guy,
Hmm.
like the book suggests, a real mystic heart kind of guy.
Yes.
This book is, it's all about easing suffering, human suffering,
Hmm.
and kind of in a beautiful way, becoming more perfect human vehicles.
Right, right.
It's all about, what he calls the gospel, which are kind of like the cosmic laws, the laws of God, or however you want to put it,
Mm.
and how they just directly impact our health.
Yeah, that's the core of it.
Yeah, well-being, the whole thing.
Right, right.
So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to join us as we try to, kind of like a surgeon,
Okay.
extract the core insights from Heindel's really deep exploration of the occult
Hmm.
principles. And I mean, the principles behind health and spiritual medicine.
Yeah, so we're going to try to kind of
It's a lot.
demystify these ideas a little
Yeah,
bit.
it
For
is.
you, maybe spark some aha moments, without,
We don't want to lose people,
right?
and all that
Yeah,
esoterica.
no one wants to drown in a sea of terms.
No. Right.
Exactly.
Exactly. So where does Heindel start with this whole health thing?
Well, he takes us way, way back to
Way back.
the beginnings of human development.
Right.
Specifically,
Pre-humans, almost.
you could think of it like that, yeah.
Okay.
He starts with the Atlantean races. And he kind of paints this picture of humanity in a very different state than we experience it now.
Different how?
Well, their spiritual evolution and their physical form weren't as tightly integrated
Right.
as they are for us today.
I see.
So, for example, the spirit, that core spark of consciousness,
Yeah.
it wasn't fully indwelling the physical body in the way that we experience it now.
Okay.
Think of it like,
Let's go right there, yeah.
yeah, think of it like trying to, operate a really sophisticated machine with a slightly unreliable remote control.
I see.
The connection isn't always direct or complete.
Okay, interesting.
And so he suggests that this partially external connection actually had a very specific physical manifestation.
What does that even mean?
Well, he proposes that the main point of connection for their vital body, which is, that sort of energetic blueprint that underlies our physical form, was located quite a distance above their physical head. Yeah, so he talks about, how there's that specific point between the eyebrows.
Mm-hmm.
But in these early Atlanteans, the corresponding point in the vital body was way higher up.
Okay.
And over, vast epochs, those 2 points kind of gradually aligned
Okay.
and they descended
Interesting.
and finally met in the physical form the way they are for us today,
Mhm.
like right here between the eyebrows.
Yeah.
And that union, that's what became the real seed of the indwelling spirit.
Okay, so this point is like important.
It's absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
And now if we look at this spatial separation,
Mm-hmm.
because remember, their vital body was much higher than their physical form. Their inner vision, their ability to perceive spiritual dimensions was much more acute
Mm-hmm.
than their understanding of the actual physical world.
So they were more connected to like
To the unseen.
unseen. Okay.
Precisely.
Interesting.
And he even suggests that the physical world for them was actually shrouded in this like dense, almost perpetual fog.
Like they were just like swimming in like a spiritual soup.
You could think of it that way, yeah.
Okay.
Like their primary mode of interacting was really with the unseen realms.
Okay.
As opposed to the physical world that
We are so focused on.
Yeah, exactly, that we take for granted.
Right.
And then, as time goes on,
Mm.
this dense Atlantean atmosphere gradually cleared, right? At the same time, that point in the vital body, it steadily descended.
Mm-hmm.
It kept getting closer and closer to its counterpart in the physical form.
Okay.
And finally, in kind of the latter part of the Atlantean epoch, it was fully united.
Okay.
And that wasn't just a physical change, it was a complete shift.
Like in how they saw the world.
In how humanity experienced and perceived reality, yeah.
So they
Probably
became
shifted their focus.
more focused on this physical world.
Precisely. They went from the inner landscape to the outer world.
Okay, and how did these different stages of Atlantean development manifest?
That's where it gets fascinating. Heindel outlines, at least he outlines the first 5 of the 7 Atlantean races.
Okay.
And each one is kind of a further step in this journey
Yeah.
of integration and evolving perception.
So like the first 5?
Yeah, well, let's go through them.
Okay, yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, so first we have the Romohals.
The Romahals. Okay.
Their memory was very, very limited, and it was mostly tied to those raw sensory experiences. So
Okay.
they could recall colors, tones.
Very primal.
Very primal, exactly.
Okay.
And so their development of feeling was really connected to that sensation.
Okay.
And then they developed a rudimentary form of language.
Okay.
And this was a big step, right? Because they moved beyond simple sounds.
Mm-hmm.
They actually started assigning names to objects and to experiences.
So they were becoming more complex, a little more nuanced.
Exactly.
Okay, so who's next?
So following the Romohals came the Tlavatlis.
Okay, the Tlavatlis.
And with the Tlavatlis, we see a sense of individual worth kind of emerge. A bit of ambition. They had this desire for their deeds to be remembered.
Mm-hmm.
And memory itself, it became important not just for the individual, but for the whole community.
I see.
And so you kind of see the groundwork being laid for ancestor worship,
Okay, makes sense.
a way of collectively preserving memory and legacy.
I see.
Then we have the Toltecs.
Toltecs, okay.
This is when things got a little more structured.
How so?
Well, they ushered in those concepts of monarchy and hereditary succession.
Oh, okay.
The idea of leadership and status being passed down through families.
What?
They started honoring individuals based on their lineage.
Wow.
And experience itself became very highly valued.
So like elders,
Yeah, exactly.
elders.
Wise elders.
And the faculty of memory, it underwent a huge development during this time.
So from basic primal instincts, it's evolving into something more.
Exactly.
Yeah. Keep going. What's next?
Now, as we move into the middle period of Atlantis, we see the rise of separate nations. And unfortunately, kind of a darker trend emerges.
What do you mean?
Well, the kings, they started misusing their power,
So,
driven by selfishness and greed,
The classic story.
The classic story, yeah. And this brings us to the 4th Atlantean race, the original Turanians.
Okay.
And he describes them, well, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he describes them in
In not so glowing terms.
not so glowing terms, no. He basically says they were incredibly selfish.
Oh.
They went so far as to construct temples.
Temples?
Yes, and they would worship their kings as divine beings.
Oh, wow. So they were like little...
Little gods.
Yeah.
And it's this stark picture of the ego, totally unchecked.
So ego ran amok.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then finally...
And finally, we come to the original Semites.
Okay.
And Heindel, he considers them to be the 5th
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps the most pivotal
Oh, of all them.
of all 7
Okay.
of the Atlantean races.
Interesting.
And he says they had this crucial realization of the power of thought.
Okay.
They understood that brain intellectual capacity was
Right.
superior to brawn, just brute physical strength.
Right.
And he actually calls them the seed race for our current Aryan epoch,
Okay.
which we're living in now.
So
We are descendants of the original Semites.
Interesting.
Yeah, and during their time, the atmosphere really started to clear up.
That fog is lifting.
The fog's lifting, yeah. And that point in the vital body, remember?
Yeah. The one way up high.
It finally aligned completely within the physical form.
Oh, interesting.
And this led to, clear outer vision,
Okay.
but also, interestingly, a decrease in inner spiritual sight.
Oh, so like a trade-off almost.
It's this trade-off.
Okay.
For clarity in the physical world, we lost a bit of that direct spiritual perception.
Interesting.
It's, part of our evolutionary journey.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But moving on from this this grand kind of historical sweep, Heindel, he goes into this this fascinating and maybe less obvious connection
Mm-hmm.
between our thoughts and our very blood.
Okay. Thoughts and blood.
Yeah, and this is where it gets a little more
esoteric.
out there. Yeah.
Okay. So how are they connected, thoughts and blood?
Well, he references the work of physiologists and phrenologists of his time.
Okay.
And they had started to map, specific areas of the brain to different types of thought activity.
Okay.
And then he makes this connection, a kind of surprising one.
What is it?
He says thought actually leads to the breakdown of nerve tissue.
Wait, so thinking is
It has a physical effect.
It's like wearing down your brain.
Yeah, kind of like it's like a byproduct.
Oh, interesting.
And this waste product, along with, all the other metabolic byproducts in the body, is then replenished and carried away by the blood.
I see.
It's like this constant cycle.
Like a little ecosystem.
Yeah, of activity and renewal. But here's what I find really interesting. He has this sort of like futuristic idea.
Yeah, I see.
He suggests that as humanity evolves and as the heart itself potentially develops into a fully voluntary muscle under the control of the unifying life spirit, that spirit will gain the ability to consciously direct the flow of blood.
So we'll be able to, like, control our blood flow.
Potentially, yeah.
Wow.
And the implications of this are huge.
Oh, I can imagine.
Because he proposes that this life spirit could essentially withhold blood from those areas of the brain that we habitually use for selfish thoughts.
Wait, so like if you're thinking selfish thoughts, your blood would be cut off?
Well, he says eventually those neural pathways, those centers, they would atrophy through a lack of nourishment.
Wow, so it's like a biological mechanism to
to encourage altruism.
To encourage altruism, yeah. That's kind of wild.
Yeah, it's a pretty radical concept, I'll admit.
Yeah.
But then he shifts his focus to children and specifically to the development of individuality.
Okay, so how does he connect that with blood?
Well, he makes a direct link between the emergence of the I feeling.
That sense of self, yeah.
Yeah, that sense of self with the thymus gland and the production of blood, particularly up to around age 14.
Okay, so how does that work?
So he explains that in the very earliest stages of life, infancy,
Yeah.
the thymus gland is the primary source of blood corpuscles for the developing child.
Okay.
And this gland, by the way, it's largest in the fetus, and then it starts to shrink after birth.
I see.
And the blood that comes from the thymus gland, it's actually derived from the parents.
Oh, interesting.
So the young child, they don't have a fully developed sense of individuality yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Because their blood is literally coming from their parents.
So they are like an extension of their parents almost.
You could think of it like that.
Interesting.
And so it's not until the child's body begins to manufacture its own blood corpuscles that the I feeling, that sense of self really starts to solidify.
Okay.
And he correlates this development with the gradual shrinking and disappearance of the thymus gland.
Okay.
Which usually happens around age 14.
So that's when the ego, takes over.
Takes full control
Yeah.
of the blood supply.
Okay, so the blood supply, that's like the key to the whole thing.
It's a crucial element.
Okay.
Yeah. And he connects this, he connects the vital body's subtle energies.
Okay.
What he calls the ethers.
Okay.
Specifically the chemical ether, the life ether, and the light ether.
Those are the ethers. Okay.
To different 7-year cycles in our development.
So like cycles of 7 years.
Precisely.
Okay, like what does that look like?
Well, he suggests that the chemical ether, which is mostly responsible for assimilation of nutrients and just overall physical growth, reaches its full maturity around age 7. Then, as we progress to 14, the life ether, which governs the forces of propagation and reproduction, becomes dominant.
Okay.
And during this time, from 7 to 14, the body often shows this excess of assimilation. It stores up energy.
It's like stocking up.
Yeah. And later, that energy is directed towards the development of the sexual organs.
Oh, okay.
And then the third 7-year cycle, from 14 to 21, he links that with the light ether, which is responsible for regulating blood heat.
The blood heat, okay.
It works through the heart to keep the temperature balanced, stable. And this is where it gets really interesting, because he talks about how our emotions can impact this delicate balance.
Okay.
So, for example, when we experience intense passions or, uncontrolled rage or even just a burst of temper, this can overheat the blood.
Wait, so emotions can actually overheat the blood?
He says it's like a surge of energy.
Wow.
And it can be so intense that it actually drives the ego.
Which is like our self or consciousness.
Yeah, our consciousness, partially outside of the physical body.
So you're not even fully in your body?
Not fully there, yeah.
Wow.
And this is why we say things like boiling over with anger.
It's like a visceral reaction.
Exactly, or losing your head.
You're not thinking straight.
Yeah, you're not thinking clearly because literally the ego is being driven out of the body.
Wow, so it's It's not just a figure of speech. It's like a literal thing.
It's a literal thing.
Wow.
And fear has the opposite effect.
Oh, how so?
It causes the ego to draw the blood inward,
Okay.
away from the surface.
So the opposite of like...
Of anger.
And this causes paleness.
Oh, yeah, when you get scared and you
turn white?
Yeah.
Exactly, and it paralyzes thought.
You can't think straight.
Yeah, you can't...
Frozen.
Frozen.
Wow, okay.
He even connects fever and delirium to this.
Really?
Because that's like extreme heat.
Internally, that disrupts the ego's functioning.
Interesting.
And so he contrasts this with the what he calls the full-blooded individual.
Okay, full-blooded, what does that mean?
It's someone who has good control over their blood.
So the ego's in control?
The ego's in control, exactly, compared
yeah.
to someone anemic who's often,
Like sluggish, tired.
sluggish, sleepy.
Yeah, okay.
Less ego control.
I see.
And what's fascinating is he brings in this historical perspective,
Okay.
He points out that ancient people, like the Old Norse and the Scots, they intuitively recognized this connection between ego and blood.
Okay.
And this was the basis for practices like mixing blood.
Oh, like a blood brotherhood?
Yeah, like a ritual.
Yeah.
It was a way of forging kinship.
Okay.
They understood that the ego was in the blood.
Interesting.
Yeah, and he talks about patriarchal families, figures like
Like Adam, Noah, those guys?
Adam, Methuselah, yeah.
Hmm.
He says their blood contained these pictures of their ancestors' experiences.
Like literally pictures.
It's like a living tapestry of their lineage, constantly present to their inner vision.
That's amazing. So their blood was like a history book.
It was a living record of
Yeah.
their ancestry.
Wow. And so our blood today is more...
It's more individual.
Yeah.
He says it holds the record of our own experiences, but mostly accessible to the subconscious.
Okay, so not like readily available.
Not right there on the surface.
Interesting. Okay. Anything else on this blood thing?
Yeah, he mentions these Lucifer spirits.
Okay, Lucifer spirits.
Associated with Mars, the planet Mars.
Okay.
And they influence our blood heat.
How do they do that?
Through iron.
The metals?
The metal, yeah.
Okay.
He says they dissolve the iron in our blood, which allows us to attract and absorb oxygen from the sun.
I see.
Solar oxygen.
So Lucifer spirits are helping us to
stay warm, to maintain our energy.
Wow.
And he says,
this is all pretty fascinating, to be honest.
It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it is.
So he says the full expression of the ego, our individuality, coincides with the birth of the fully developed mind.
Okay.
Which happens around age 21.
Like when you're an adult.
Yeah, and it's interesting because even in, secular legal systems, 21 is often seen as the age of full responsibility.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's like this point where
things come together.
Yeah, where everything kind of clicks into place.
Yeah, okay.
And finally, he draws a distinction between nucleated blood and non-nucleated blood.
Okay, nucleated, non-nucleated, what's the difference?
So nucleated blood, that's found in lower animals.
Okay.
And also initially in the human fetus.
Okay.
And he attributes that to the control of a group spirit.
Okay.
Or the mother's vital life force.
Okay, so the child is still under the influence of like a collective force almost.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
But after quickening,
Yeah, the quickening.
that's when the individual ego enters the physical form.
Okay.
Then we develop non-nucleated blood.
So that's when you become a truly individual being.
Yes, with your own unique blood.
Wow.
And he emphasizes how precious this blood is because it's the medium for generating soul power.
Okay.
And he warns against ever giving up control of this blood to external entities.
Oh, so like...
To spirits, to outside forces.
Oh, I see.
We have to maintain our sovereignty over our own blood.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
It's a powerful warning.
It is, it is.
Yeah.
So what about the vital body?
Ah, yes, the vital body.
And its role in all of this.
It's absolutely crucial for
Right.
both health and disease.
Okay, so tell me more about that.
All right, so Heindel, he describes how food is transformed within us.
Yep.
It reaches this kind of alchemical state
Alchemical state.
and condenses into what he calls blood gas.
Blood gas, okay.
And this blood gas, it forms the basis for new tissues.
Mm-hmm.
It's constantly replacing old tissues.
Okay.
And the spleen, he says,
The spleen.
that's the vital body's gateway.
Oh.
It's the point where solar force enters the body.
I see.
It's like the entry point for this life-giving energy.
Okay, and the spleen is like the gateway.
Exactly.
The solar force.
Precisely.
Okay, interesting.
And the spleen isn't just passive,
It's like an active organ.
He describes it as a battleground.
Battleground.
between the desire body and the vital body.
So there's like a conflict going on.
Yeah, constant interaction
Mm-hmm.
and negative emotions like worry, fear, anger.
Yeah, those pesky emotions.
They can disrupt the spleen's function.
Oh, so your emotions can actually affect your spleen.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And specifically, he talks about the process of evaporation in the spleen.
Evaporation.
He says it's crucial,
Okay.
but negative thoughts can interfere with it.
So your thoughts can mess with your evaporation.
Exactly.
Wow.
And this leads to what he calls lost opportunities.
Lost opportunities, what does that mean?
So when the spleen's activity is disrupted,
Mm-hmm.
a little speck of plasm can form. And this plasm is immediately grabbed by a thought elemental.
A thought elemental.
It's like a little entity.
Like a little being?
Yeah, created by our own thoughts.
Wow.
And this combination forms a nucleus for destructive processes in the body.
So like a little seed of disease.
Exactly. And these thought elementals, he says,
Mm-hmm.
they can capture white blood cells.
So they're taking over your immune system?
Essentially, yeah. And so these become lost opportunities for the ego to control things.
Okay.
And they contribute to disease.
So you're saying a weak vital body
Mm-hmm.
plus like turbulent emotions.
Yeah. An uncontrolled desire body
That creates an environment where,
disease can thrive.
wow.
He then makes this interesting observation.
Okay.
He says people who are generally jovial, religious, faithful,
Okay.
they have fewer of these lost opportunities.
Really?
Yeah, he says they're less prone to worry and anxiety.
So there's a connection between your attitude
Of your mental state.
and your health.
Absolutely.
And then he moves on to,
It's a lot to take in.
it is, but it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It's going.
All right, so he talks about the ductless glands.
Okay, the ductless glands, those are
Those are
the mysterious ones.
the mysterious ones. Yeah, not everyone talks about them.
Right.
And their relationship to our finer bodies.
Okay, so finer bodies, those are like
The energetic layers.
beyond the physical.
Beyond the physical, yeah.
Okay, so he's saying the physical body is not all there is.
It's just the outermost layer of a
Yeah.
much more complex being.
Okay.
And these finer bodies, they interpenetrate the physical body.
So they're like kind of woven together.
Yeah, like air permeates water, he says.
Okay.
And each of these layers, has its own domain, its own influence.
Okay, so like what are these finer bodies?
Well, he mentions the vital body, the desire body, and the mind sheath.
Okay, and those are like,
Those are the layers, the energetic layers of our being.
and he uses the analogy of a snail.
Okay.
It secretes its shell.
Right.
Gradually, it crystallizes.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, and he says the physical body is like that.
It's like a crystallization of
Those finer forces.
Okay.
And he divides the soft tissues of the body into two main types, glands and muscles.
Okay, so glands and muscles, those are the key players.
Yeah, and he says the glands, they're actually special manifestations of the vital body.
Okay, so the vital body is expressing itself through the glands.
Yeah, and the blood as well. And he traces the origin of the vital body all the way back to the sun period.
The sun period, so like way, way back.
Eons and eons ago.
Wow.
And he says over time, this vital body crystallized. And that's what led to the glands we see today.
So the glands are like ancient
Crystallization.
of the vital body.
Yes, precisely.
Okay.
And astrologically, he links the glands with the sun.
Okay, the sun.
Yeah, and Jupiter.
Jupiter, okay, so like expansion, growth.
Exactly. Those are the energies associated with those planets.
Yeah, okay.
Now, muscles, he says, those are also built by the vital body.
Okay.
But specifically after the desire body has been active.
The desire body, which is like our